Coming up on Bridge City News, the U.S. presidential election is underway with more than 230 million eligible voters. Many are speaking out about what their biggest concerns are. A 10-year-old Raymond, Alberta boy who went missing yesterday has been found safe and sound. And a big fundraising concert is coming up in support of the Lethbridge Food Bank. Video journalist Micah Quinn will have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is Election Day in the United States. More than 100 million Americans have already voted. Now that's close to half of the 233 million eligible voters. Will it be the Republican incumbent Donald Trump, or will it be the Democrat, former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden? Last night, Trump said he appreciated being able to make so many campaign stops thanks to the help of top-quality healthcare professionals as he battled COVID-19.
I was surrounded by these doctors, 12 doctors I've told this story. Each one was a specialist. Johns Hopkins, Walter Reed Medical Center is incredible. You know, that's our military center. It's incredible. And I'm surrounded, right? I'm just surrounded by these brilliant doctors. One thing, when you're president, you get a lot of doctors. And each doctor grabbed a different part of my body. And I said, I don't like this at all.
Joe Biden, meanwhile, was in Pittsburgh last night telling black voters that the power to change the United States is in their hands.
My message is simple. The power to change this country is in your hands. And I don't care how hard Donald Trump tries. There's nothing he can do to stop the people of this nation from voting, no matter how he tries. It's time for Donald Trump to pack his bags and go home. Go home. Look, we're done with the chaos. We're done with the racism. We're done with the tweets, the anger, the hate, the failure, the irresponsibility. But we got a lot of work to do, folks. If I'm elected president, we're going to act. On day one, we're going to act to get COVID under control.
When it comes to the popularity of the two candidates, there doesn't seem to be much of a contest. That's according to American journalist Lisa Daftari. Lisa says even filmmaker Michael Moore, who's a Democrat, admits that Trump supporters travel greater distances to see Trump rather than the support that Joe Biden receives.
Michael Moore, who is a very outspoken critic of the president, said this in Twitter, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, you want to know why Trump won the first time? It's because there are people who will travel 750 miles in order to see him at a rally. I wouldn't even travel 5 miles to see Bernie or Biden or whomever, and that's why they win.
Lisa will also have details of a recent poll which says that 50% of Americans have never heard of the term anti-Semitism. That interview is coming up later in our program. For many Latino voters in the United States, they say the economy is a key election issue for them heading into the election.
The economy is great for people that are not low income. The economy is great for people that are already doing all right. But there are people like me and my neighbors that could use a little kick in the butt, for lack of a better word, maybe a little bit of a boost. And I don't think I want free food or free money or I mean, the stimulus thing would be great to get started, but I really, really, really believe, and this takes me back to that part, it's like help us to earn for ourselves.
I want a robust economy. I want to return to having the middle class matter. I want to return to pre-COVID when our finances were all working for all the classes, and it wasn't just for super elite rich. It was for everyone.
In Alabama and Tennessee, farmers are casting their ballots for Donald Trump, whose defining economic act began a trade war with China. Many say the Trump administration's attention to problems facing farmers today has won over their vote.
Well, I voted for the current president. Well, I've been farming about, between 35, 40 years. There's been a time or two that I've wondered where my next dollar was coming from. And I can relate to some of the decisions he makes, because some of the decisions are not based politically, they're based on good, sound business.
What is called a trade war needed to be done. And although it was hard on a lot of people, especially the farmers knew this was something that needed to be done. It's a slow process, but at least he has made an effort. We haven't had anyone that has made an effort in decades. I will vote for Trump. I'll have to say I don't like his Twitter account. I don't even like to hear him talk, but I look at his policies, and his policies have been very important for the farmer and for the nation.
Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco are among many cities in the U.S. where business owners are boarding up storefronts in anticipation of possible clashes in the wake of Election Day. Oregon's governor made a plea for peace.
We know that there are some people who might want to use peaceful election night protests to promote violence and property destruction. That behavior is not acceptable. Violence is never the answer. We stand here today urging all Oregonians to commit to non-violent expression. We can all do our parts this week by staying calm, cool, and collected.
It seems that even people in Lethbridge are getting into the U.S. election. If you were driving around the north part of the city earlier today, you would have seen this funny electronic billboard set up in the industrial area. It shows a picture of Joe Biden saying, "I think I voted for Trump." The town of Claresholm has said no thanks to a proposed face-covering bylaw. Now, during a special meeting at council Monday night, the mask bylaw was voted down. Last week, Coaldale also voted against a mandatory face-covering bylaw. Claresholm Mayor Doug McPherson says even though they voted against the bylaw, they still want residents to remain diligent in following safety protocols.
It's very important to wear a mask, and nobody on our council is saying that you shouldn't wear a mask. We are solidly behind wearing a mask in public gatherings and in stores and anywhere that you're going to come into contact with people that are outside your circle. But again, the enforcement for us, we felt we could leave it up to individual choice for this time. If things change and it gets worse in Alberta, we will readdress this. But right now, I think we're good the way we are.
The region of Willow Creek, which includes Claresholm, has 22 active cases of COVID-19. Police say a 36-year-old woman was killed after she was struck by a truck on a rural road near McGrath, Alberta last night. RCMP say officers were called to a vehicle and pedestrian collision around 18 kilometers southwest of the town around 7:30 p.m. EMS attended and transported the woman to hospital where she later died. Police say the early investigation shows the truck was driving north on Range Road 225 at the time of the collision. Blood Tribe Police confirmed that the human remains found over the weekend are those of Jason Manyfingers. Manyfingers was last seen September 20th filling up his truck at a fast gas station in Pincher Creek. He was reported missing by his family on October the 1st. Manyfingers' death is not being considered suspicious. A 10-year-old Raymond, Alberta boy who went missing yesterday has been found safe and sound. A missing persons notice was sent out for Miles Gilbert after he failed to show up for class at Raymond Elementary School. A number of community members took up a search for the boy, along with local police and Lethbridge Search and Rescue. The boy's family say they don't want to reveal exactly where he was found, but that he had been trapped somewhere and was located around 5:30 p.m. yesterday.
The emotions were just, like I said, I couldn't start crying because if I did, I wouldn't stop. I just was so scared. Like my worst nightmare as a grandma. What if something happened to one of my grandkids? The town just came out in groves. Like we had vehicles everywhere, looking everywhere, people on foot, businesses offering to let us look at their video surveillance, people in the community just bringing us food so that we could keep our nourishment up and not have to stop and worry about feeding the other kids.
Around 20 windows were smashed and 6 iPads were stolen from Mike Mountain Horse School on the city's west side. Police say around 5 a.m. on Sunday, an alarm was sounded and they were called in. The school's principal, Aaron Herkett, says the theft really hurts since the tablets are a big part of the kids' day-to-day learning.
In the classroom, they will definitely feel the loss until they're replaced. Of course, there's a variety of different teaching methods that we use in our classrooms. It's not as though students are on the iPads all day long. However, for certain projects and different centers that they're involved in, there will definitely be an impact. I think that we're still waiting to see what comes of the investigation, and I'd need to talk to some people in our division office just to see what's happening with our insurance and that type of thing. If it can't be covered, then perhaps there would be a fundraising initiative. I'm not sure at this point in time.
Lethbridge police were unable to determine the exact cause of damages. A couple of more schools have seen COVID-19 cases in Lethbridge. Alberta Health has declared an outbreak at Senator Joyce Fairburn Middle School and issued a COVID-19 alert for General Stewart Elementary School. There are currently 2 or more active coronavirus cases at Joyce Fairburn and 1 active case at General Stewart Elementary. Officials with AHS say they've been working closely with the Lethbridge School Division to support and manage the safety of the schools in our city. The Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation had to cancel their annual Christmas Tree Festival due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the foundation will be moving to an online format this year and sharing their favorite trees from years past. A spokesperson with the CRHF says in previous years, the festival brought in big money.
Sure. So the Christmas Tree Festival is this would have been the 26th year. So it's a long-standing event in Lethbridge and a very successful one. So, the event usually nets well over $100,000. So, we would have expected that to be the same this year. Obviously, that's a bit of a blow to our budget, but, it's COVID-19 and really the safety of our community is our highest priority. So we'll feel that, but, we're excited to get back next year.
The Best of the Christmas Tree Festival will run from November 12th through December 12th. Lifting spirits and being positive can really change someone's life. Now, that's exactly what the Lethbridge Food Bank fundraiser is hoping to achieve. As Micah Quinn explains now, Honker's Pub and Eatery will be hosting a nonprofit concert next week, with all of the proceeds going to support many who are in need.
Music will be rolled out at Honker's Pub and Eatery on November 10th. And all proceeds and donations will go to the Lethbridge Food Bank. The idea for the fundraiser came from discussions on how hard the COVID-19 pandemic has hit the community.
And how people are in so much more need this year than previous years. So we wanted to come up with a concept where we could get local businesses involved, as well as individuals involved, and have the community come together to do something to try to do good for others who are in need.
Vicki Vandenhoek is the owner and operator of Honker's Pub, and she says that they will be on top of COVID guidelines for the event.
Checking temperatures with our temperature gun, taking down their full name and number, their phone number, and we'll make sure that they sanitize. We have people who are working, our staff, during the event, sanitizing door handles and everything that can be touched.
Jillian McLeod is one of the co-creators of the fundraiser, and she sings for the band Vintage Wine, who will be playing at the event.
So you get to have more fun because you know that behind it all, you're actually doing this for a really good cause and you're helping people that really need help. And this is the year where people are struggling more than any other year, so.
The Lethbridge Food Bank is hoping to put the money towards Christmas hamper purchases this year.
Of course, we have to plan in advance and early for our Christmas hampers, and this is a great time and perfect event that we can allocate those funds towards the Christmas hampers.
There's currently a GoFundMe called the Lethbridge Food Bank Fundraiser 2020 that has a goal of $5,000. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Regina Food Bank says it has surpassed its goal of enough donations in October to provide 1 million meals. It says it received enough donations for 1.4 million meals with the help of the corporate sponsor, the Mosaic Company. The food drive included corporate sponsorships, meals raised by schools, and a drive-through event. Officials with the food bank say they're blown away by the community's generosity. Canada is joining dozens of other countries in approving HIV self-testing. Experts say this will be critical to preventing the spread of the infection. Health Canada granted a medical device licensed by Biolytical Labs in Richmond, BC for their 1-minute finger prick blood test. It is the first HIV self-test to be approved in Canada. Experts say the approval could be the missing piece to reaching an estimated 9,000 people in Canada living with undiagnosed HIV. The government of Alberta says there were 2,268 new cases of COVID-19 in our province since Friday, and that includes 15 new deaths related to the virus. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says there were an average of 567 new cases identified per day. The total number of active cases in Alberta hit 6,110 today. Of those, 2,581 were in the Edmonton zone, 2,532 were in the Calgary zone. There are also 317 here in the South zone. Dr. Dean Henshaw says the numbers are going up, especially in Edmonton.
In Edmonton, we have 100 patients, COVID patients in hospital as of today, and the rest of the patients in acute care that I mentioned earlier, they are around the rest of the province. And so it really is Edmonton right now that is seeing the biggest impact on our acute care. As I mentioned, we have 27 cases in ICU. The majority of those, again, are in Edmonton.
As for the city of Lethbridge, there are currently 153 active cases of COVID-19. Lethbridge County, meanwhile, has 36 active coronavirus cases. Canada's two most populated provinces are reporting a combined tally of close to 2,000 new COVID-19 cases today, along with 48 additional deaths. Ontario's 1,050 new patients marks a new high for the province, while Quebec is reporting 871 cases, along with 34 fatalities. The Manitoba government is holding a series of telephone town halls focusing on enforcement of COVID-19 public health measures. Officials say callers can discuss a curfew being considered to help stop the spread of the virus. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister says he's considering a curfew as doctors sound the alarm about pressures mounting on hospitals and healthcare workers. Health officials said 75 of 80 intensive care beds were filled with patients yesterday, and of those, 11 people were on ventilators. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet blasted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, saying the PM's response to attacks in France that authorities have attributed to Muslim extremists does not go far enough. The comments represented Blanchet's latest efforts as he tries to distance himself from the Trudeau Liberals.
I'm ashamed that some French people could believe that what Mr. Trudeau has said is what Quebecers think. I want him to admit that. You define it as hate speech. So far, it's been defined as some drawings carrying irony, carrying some humorous way to say things. So there's a distinction here. However, I believe that the freedom of speech is very large. I receive on a daily basis hundreds of messages, a lot of them clearly hateful. And I never ask for the state to stop those people from writing and sending.
It was another stunning day across southwestern Alberta again today, but how long will the summer-like conditions continue? A complete look at the weather picture, including the record high for this day, is coming up shortly. The summer-like weather continued across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we should enjoy the warm weather while we can, since the white stuff is on the way.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good idea, Hal, because of this coming weekend, the temps are going to drop. So let's enjoy it while we can. As we see, we had a high of 20 degrees today. Overnight low 9 degrees, and not too bad. We could see some partly cloudy skies and some wind gusts. A bit windy tomorrow as well. 17 our high under sunny skies for Wednesday. Overnight low on Wednesday evening. 11 degrees, which also is not too bad for an overnight low. And then as we look into the 5-day forecast, we remain in the double digits for Thursday under a mix of sun and cloud. 16 the high. But then as we get closer to that weekend, look what's happening here. So we could see a chance of rain or snow on Friday developing into Friday night as well. So high of 4 degrees. And then that temperature is going to drop to -4 for Saturday. Periods of snow expected on both Saturday and Sunday. So not the greatest weekend ahead of us. -6 the high on Sunday, and then up to 2 degrees for next Monday under sunny skies as we get into the beginning of next week. So the average high for this time of year should be around 8 degrees. So as you could see today, as we reached 20 degrees, we're well above that. Maybe not for long though. Average low -4. High temperature on this day was back in 1962. It was 22 degrees, and -16 was that low temperature. That was in 1991. Sun rose this morning at 7:24 a.m. and our sunset this evening 5:06 p.m. as we are starting to get out of work, and it's going to be dark pretty soon as the days are getting shorter, especially with that time change, of course. Now, on the West Coast, we saw a frontal system come in, bringing in subtropical moisture, which gave them a heavy rainfall warning today. That rain's going to continue into tonight and tomorrow for the West Coast there. Edmonton tomorrow, high 16 and 19 in Calgary. Not a bad day across Alberta tomorrow. Same thing for the rest of the prairies. Saskatchewan, look at this. Saskatoon's high 15, 19 expected to be the high tomorrow in Regina, and 16 over in Winnipeg under sunny skies. So the prairies definitely loving the temperatures this week. Over here in central Canada, not so much. Ottawa, 0 is the high tomorrow with increasing cloud. Could see possibility of some flurries tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 2 degrees. 8 degrees the high for Toronto tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. That partly cloudy skies continuing here in Fredericton area. 1 degree the high, 1 also the high for Charlottetown. Now Charlottetown could see a chance of flurries. In Halifax though, mix of freezing drizzle turning to rain there. 3 degrees is our high expected for Halifax tomorrow, and 8 degrees for St. John's, Newfoundland. They could see high winds gusting to 80 kilometers per hour and a chance of showers as well. There you go, that is your weather.
The liquidation of iconic clothing chain Le Chateau is underway. Their discounts up to 40% off at all 121 stores and online. The company's 900 employees will continue to help customers during the liquidation that will remain open as permitted by provincial and regional COVID-19 guidelines. Le Chateau spent most of the pandemic trying to refinance or sell its business to a third party that would have kept it in operation, but the attempts were unsuccessful. Global stock markets and U.S. futures rose today on investors' hopes of a possible victory by Joe Biden may lead to more economic stimulus. London and Frankfurt opened higher, while Sydney, Seoul, and Shanghai also advanced. Traders are betting Biden might push for a bigger U.S. stimulus if he unseats U.S. President Donald Trump. That would require support in the Senate, which is controlled by Trump's Republicans. When it comes to making money and being successful in Canada, a new tax is the last thing we need. That's according to a former chief economic analyst with Stats Canada. Philip Cross says politicians on Parliament Hill who have been pushing for a wealth tax are wrong. He says it would be counterproductive and discourage Canadians from becoming successful.
A wealth tax actually penalizes the very behavior that we know is best for an economy in the long term, which is saving and investment. And it rewards people who engage in frivolous consumption. So we really get all our economic incentives backwards with a wealth tax. So I think in the simplest terms, that's why it isn't good for economic growth in the long term.
Catch the full interview with former Chief Economic Analyst Philip Cross and Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, home sales continue to go up in British Columbia. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says home sales on the Lower Mainland were up 29% in October from a year ago. The board says it was the second best October on record. Its sales were up 1.2% from September amid a surge in sales of detached homes. The benchmark price for Vancouver homes was up 6% from last October and 0.4% from September. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The indices were all up today as polls show that Joe Biden was leading in the presidential election and business owners could see a larger potential stimulus package. The TSX was up 242 points on the day to finish at 15,939. The Dow was up 554 points to 27,480. The S&P 500 was up 58 points to 3369, and the Nasdaq was up 202 points on the day to 11,160. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.34 to $38.15 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 19 cents to $3.05 US. Gold was down a cent to $19.0916 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $24.23 US an ounce. Wheat is at $269 per metric ton, barley's at $268, canola's at $535, and corn is at $270 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 73 cents to $107.83. Feeder cattle were down 88 cents to $133.18, and lean hogs were down 55 cents to $65.40. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.14 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a 10-year-old Raymond, Alberta boy who went missing yesterday has been found safe and sound. A missing persons notice was sent out for Miles Gilbert after he failed to show up for class at Raymond Elementary School. A number of community members took up a search for the boy, along with local police and Lethbridge Search and Rescue. While few details were released, officials say the boy was found late yesterday afternoon. There are some MPs in Ottawa who would like to see a wealth tax. A former chief economic analyst with Stats Canada thinks it's a very bad idea. Find out why in an interview with Philip Cross and Jeanette Rocher coming up next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here is your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to a lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Do you or someone you love struggle with a gambling problem? Is it causing chaos to your life and relationships? Gamblers Anonymous holds weekly meetings on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and Thursdays at 6 at 408 13th Street North. For more information, call 403-331-0822 or visit albertaga.net. Go back in time and see what it was like to live as a pioneer. Coyote Flats Pioneer Village is a Western heritage museum located 1.5 kilometers south of Pitcher Butte. Walk through the village and see a railway station, post office, fire hall, school, and so much more. The museum is open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with admission of $10 for adults or $20 per family. Mobility scooters are available to guests by donation. For more information, visit coyoteflats.org. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The idea of introducing a wealth tax in Canada for the richest individuals in our country has been gaining steam recently, and it seems a lot of Canadians like this concept. But is it actually a good idea? Today's guest is Philip Cross. He is the former Chief Economic Analyst for Stats Canada and a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute. He's the author of a new report called Does Canada Need a Wealth Tax? And you can find that at fraserinstitute.org. Philip, thank you so much for being with us today. He joins us via Skype from Ottawa.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Now, Philip, can you first of all explain exactly what a wealth tax is, how it works, and who it would apply to?
Sure. Well, a wealth tax isn't that esoteric an idea. It works a lot like a property tax, and I think most people know how a property tax works. The city comes along, it evaluates your property to be worth a certain amount of money, and then it's taxed at a rate of 2 or 3%. The only difference between a property tax and a wealth tax is a wealth tax should deduct out your liabilities. So for example, instead of just taxing the value of your home, it would be the net value of your value less your mortgage. So, but a wealth tax basically works along the same principles.
But it would apply to certain individuals making a certain income, right?
It most likely would. I mean, I think the idea is to shift the tax burden to wealthier people. So that also makes it different from a property tax. Almost all property owners pay a property tax, but a wealth tax, at least the way it's being proposed in the United States by people such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and up here by the NDP in Canada, it's meant to be targeted people earning, say $400,000 or more.
I see. Okay, so why are so many Canadians in favor of a wealth tax? Is it because the idea that a large gap in wealth inequality is a bad thing?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure. I haven't seen, when I was doing the research for this paper, I didn't see any evidence of, X percent of Canadians were in favor of a wealth tax. I did notice that the NDP, who are the one party that advocated, didn't do very well in the last election. So, and similarly, we saw that Sanders and Warren in the United States lost the Democratic nomination, of course, to Joe Biden. So, those people who have proposed a wealth tax actually haven't done well with the electorate. So I'm not sure how widespread the idea is, but you can sort of see the idea, the appeal of the idea is that, in a time when we're running such massive government deficits, of course, we're starting to look for who's going to pay for this. And the reflexive idea is always, well, let's just pass this burden on to a small number of wealthy people or a small number of corporations, and we, the vast majority of ordinary Canadians, will not bear the burden. And of course, it doesn't work out that way in real life. We know that when we hit the fiscal wall in the mid 90s, for example, it was the average Canadian who bore the brunt of tax increases. Quebec, for example, is very well known for its social democratic leanings. And yet, when they faced a deficit coming out of the 08-09 recession, they increased four taxes that affected the ordinary person. The sales tax went up 2 percentage points, the health care premium went up, tuition fees went up, and the tax on gasoline went up. So that's typically when governments need large quantities of money, frankly, they have to tax wide swaths of the population. The idea that we can get a small group of people to bear a large amount of the fiscal burden never works out. But initially, as I say, it's always people's reflexive solution when they're faced with a big fiscal challenge.
Okay, so how much of a wealth gap is there in Canada, and is it currently growing or is it shrinking?
Well, the wealth gap in Canada is much less marked than in the United States. The same is also true of income. And of course, wealth is really just, in some sense, income built up over time. You can have a high income for 1 year and not be very wealthy. But if you have a high income for several years, eventually you'll break into the top X%. What's interesting is Statistics Canada just started collecting wealth data after the 08-09 recession, when interest in wealth became much more widespread. And I was there at the time when we started this wealth survey. And what it shows is that over the last decade, the concentration of wealth amongst the richest Canadians has actually declined. So we're actually going in the opposite direction for the U.S. But as I say, I often find that we import a lot of these narratives directly from the U.S. without correcting them for the facts on the ground here in Canada. And I think the idea of a wealth tax is another good example of that.
What are some of the cons of a wealth tax? I understand that it might be quite complicated and costly to administer.
It's costly to administer. It doesn't raise a lot of money. We have a lot of experience with European countries, and they haven't been able to raise a lot of money. The net revenues are further reduced by it's very complicated to administer. And it really doesn't do much to change inequality either. So it hasn't proven, even if you're worried about inequality, and as I say, it's been falling in Canada, but even then, if you thought inequality was something that needs to be corrected, a wealth tax is probably not the way to go. It has proven to be not a very effective tool.
Now, Philip, you write that a wealth tax would constrain economic growth. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, well, basically the idea is that a wealth tax would encourage consumption. It actually penalizes savings. If I had recently signed a big contract with the Vancouver Canucks, for example, for a couple $1 million, if I go out and spend all that money on travel around the world and whining and dining with my friends, that's okay. But if I save that money and reinvest it in a corporation, that would be penalized. So a wealth tax actually penalizes the very behavior that we know is best for an economy in the long term, which is saving and investment. And it rewards people who engage in frivolous consumption. So we really get all our economic incentives backwards with a wealth tax. So I think in the simplest terms, that's why it isn't good for economic growth in the long term. It's like low interest rates. It rewards people going into debt and penalizes people who save. And we know in the long run, that's the exact opposite of the incentives we want to.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at that for sure. What can we learn from other nations who have implemented wealth taxes over the years?
Well, we do have a large number of European nations whose experience we can draw on. Starting in the mid-1980s, 14 European nations introduced a wealth tax of various forms and various severity. It's very instructive that 10 of them have given up. They just found it. In the case of Germany, the courts ruled it unconstitutional. In the case of France, they found that wealthy people were leaving the country. So they in Denmark found it was just too complicated to administer. So I think it's very instructive that most European countries gave up on trying to implement it, and those who have retained it have maintained very low tax rates. They define a very narrow base to which it's applied. It seems to be, frankly, largely token that they're keeping it even on the books. It doesn't raise significant revenues, less than 1% of GDP. It doesn't do much to change inequality. So it seems to be sort of like our carbon tax here in Canada. We slap a $20 carbon tax. We say, yippee, we've done something for the environment. And then we just jump in our cars and drive off to work as usual. It smacks of tokenism.
Now, Philip, is there any evidence that a wealth tax will actually cause wealthy individuals to move their business interests to other countries?
Yes, France in particular is very instructive in that regard. The French, when they abandoned their wealth tax, that was the number one reason they did it, was they found people were moving to other countries. The best example is Gerard Depardieu. I might be mispronouncing that, but the most famous actor in France, he very famously, in response to a wealth tax, just moved across the border to Belgium. So he was the most high-profile case. But we've seen this in other countries. There's a lot of evidence in the US, for example, that if you slap an estate tax, which is a tax on wealth of people when they die, that people will move from states that have a wealth tax or an estate tax to states that don't have one, and almost nobody moves back in the other direction. So there seems to be a lot of evidence that actually that people vote with their feet and they do move to avoid a wealth tax.
Now, how do business people typically view a wealth tax? Does it remove incentive to earn more income?
In the long run, yes, but it's much more of a concern that it removes the incentive to save and invest, and partly as a result. And most people, by the way, are don't want. Everybody holds various forms of wealth. Most Canadians hold wealth, but it's usually in the form of housing and pension savings. So the first thing that most politicians do is they say, well, of course, housing and pension savings are going to be exempt. Well, when you do that, 70% of wealth is exempt, and you end up applying a wealth tax to a very small number of assets, such as small businesses or investment funds and so on. So it tends not to, in practice, to not affect very many assets, and that's part of the problem. It ends up not being a very large tax and rather inconsequential in its effect.
Now, can this affect average Canadians in the fact of, like, let's say a business wants to create fewer jobs because of, trying to avoid the wealth tax, right? Could this impact average Canadian workers?
Oh, it certainly could. In particular, I'd be quite concerned about its rate of a business formation. We're coming through a very severe crisis now. We know the number of businesses going bankrupt is rising and likely to rise quite sharply this fall and winter. We're going to need young people, especially, to come along and found new businesses to take the place. And new businesses, in particular, they'll have a lot of debt when they're starting out. So unless you allow for that and correct for that, you can end up creating a lot of liquidity problems for new startups. They're suddenly going to be faced with a new tax on their assets. And for a lot of new firms starting out, this can, really stop them from growing. So, especially at this moment of history, when we want to encourage businesses to continue and new firms to start up, a wealth tax actually sends the exact opposite signal to investors.
Interesting. Now, are there some pros to a wealth tax? There have been a number of billionaires who say they actually support higher taxes for the extreme rich.
Yeah. Well, and yes, and I think those people should feel free. I mean, Warren Buffett is the most obvious example. He's spoken about how he should pay more taxes. I never understood, why doesn't Warren Buffett just write a check to the government of the United States and any other millionaires, billionaires out there who feel they have too much money, and if they can't find my address, then they can, send their money to the government of Canada. I'm sure they'll be happy to cash a check. The problem is that the fact that, certain individuals, a lot of the heirs of the Disney family, for example, signed this petition. Well, if you feel guilty about the money you inherited and you don't feel that you've earned it, as I say, feel free to send money to the government, but you are not free to impose those same views on other people who don't share them. And this comes back down to, a fundamental matter of liberty and freedom in our society. The other thing is, as an economist, I would say it's much more efficient to tax the income, the capital income that wealth generates. We want to encourage people to invest. Let people invest. Then, when they make money on their capital gains or they pay out dividends, tax those forms of income. That's a much more efficient way. That's not going to deter the original investments in wealth creation, and yet it will uh, lay a tax on that capital income. So there are economists would argue there are much more efficient and ways of taxing capital income without the distorting effects on savings and investment that come from a wealth tax.
Mhm. Now, Philip, with the younger generation increasingly demanding some kind of a wealth tax for the rich in order to close that wealth gap, would you care to venture a guess as to whether or not we will see a wealth tax in Canada within the next decade or two?
I'd be surprised. I mean, I think if we to do so, we would have to close our eyes to all the evidence that's been coming from Europe and other countries that this just hasn't proved to be a very good solution. There are other ways of, if you are worried about inequality, and as I say, in Canada, inequality is declining, and yet we continue to import this narrative from the US that inequality is increasing. But even if we do believe in this false narrative, there are more effective ways of dealing with it. As I say, there are ways of taxing income and especially capital income that don't have any of the really negative consequences of a wealth tax that have made it such an ineffective tool. So, I really think, I hope that wiser heads will prevail and will learn from the experience of other countries and will adopt better, more effective ways of dealing with these problems.
And with that, Philip, it looks like we are about out of time. So thanks so much, Philip, for being here with us today. Philip Cross, author of a new report, Does Canada Need a Wealth Tax? That is available at FraserInstitute.org. Thanks so much, Philip.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Close to 50% of Americans have never heard of anti-Semitism, and that's according to a recent poll. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has more on that, and she joins me now from Los Angeles. Lisa, the survey results were released by the American Jewish Committee, and they were quite surprising.
Very surprising. I mean, obviously, we all know that anti-Semitism is on the rise. We know that we have had many, many incidents all across the United States, in Europe. It's ongoing, obviously. But when this survey polled a significant amount of people in the United States to find that half of them had either never heard of the word anti-Semitism or could not define it. I mean, we talk about knowledge being the key to fighting ignorance of any kind, whether it's racism or sexism and anti-Semitism. You can add all the isms, but when people don't even know what it is or have never heard about it, I hope that they do know what hatred against groups are, including against the Jews, and that is the definition of anti-Semitism.
That's so surprising. Wow, about 50%. The U.S. federal election is upon us now, and leading up to the event, U.S. President Donald Trump had an astonishing number of events planned across multiple states during the final days of the campaign, and he continued to outpace those of his rival, Joe Biden.
This guy, I mean, talk about a miraculous recovery, not just only from COVID, but he's like the little Roadrunner cartoon. He is running all around. God bless him with all that energy to hit up all these battleground states, to have so much energy. If you look at these rallies and how much energy there is, I'll summarize it like this. Michael Moore, who is a very outspoken critic of the president, said this in Twitter, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, "You want to know why Trump won the first time? It's because there are people who will travel 750 miles in order to see him at a rally. I wouldn't even travel 5 miles to see Bernie or Biden or whomever. And that's why they win." And that is so true and to the point. Leave it to one of his critics to summarize what Trump supporters are like, especially this time around. The enthusiasm is so incredibly high, and Donald Trump is definitely seizing upon that moment and traveling throughout the United States in order to meet and greet all of his supporters.
You know what's pretty amazing too is close to 100 million Americans have already voted in the advanced polling. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. Now, leading up to the U.S. presidential election, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu continued to praise Donald Trump and his Mideast policies, Lisa. The Israeli prime minister said the alliance between Israel and the United States has never been stronger.
Yeah, and how important that you bring up the Israeli leaders' perception of our election. Not only his, but ask the Arab states that have signed on to the Abraham Accords, or ask the people in Iran. I mean, I cover this in and out every single day, and it's amazing the amount of support coming out of the Middle East and all over the world, how they view our president, and then look at this almost civil war, the two nations that are divided here in the United States of America. It is incredible to see the amount of support that the president has, partly because of his policies with regards to freeing so many places in the Middle East, with regards to bringing peace to the Middle East, with his Abraham Accords, having a plan and a future for the people of that region. So it's incredible to point that out.
Lisa, report says Iranian hackers have been targeting U.S. state government websites in an effort to really interfere with the 2020 U.S. presidential election. And that's according to the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
Yes, so it's no surprise. I mean, a nice segue from the people of Iran who support Donald Trump very, very much to the government in Iran that wants to see him go. I mean, look at all the rogue states around the world, the ones that are not so friendly with the United States, and see who they're vying for. All of them want Donald Trump out of office. They are rooting for Biden, only, as I said, to get Donald Trump out of office. And of course, the Iranian regime. Last week, we reported that they were hacking emails and sending fake emails out to voters in Florida, Arizona, in the swing states, and pretending to be a far right group, encouraging people to vote. But the FBI cybersecurity teams are on this. They obviously are keeping a very close eye on any election meddling, where it comes from China or Russia or the Iranian regime or right here at home.
An Orthodox priest was recently shot at a church in France, but the motive was unknown. Lisa, this follows the 3 people who were killed in Islamist terrorist stabbings. What's happening in France right now?
Yeah, I don't know if the motive will remain unknown for much longer. We can all take a guess as to who was behind this. There has been a fury unleashed onto France and Macron in particular for saying that cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad are okay. It's a part of free speech as long as it doesn't offend anybody. And the Arab Muslim world is up in arms about this statement. There have been and continue to be protests in the Palestinian territories, in Pakistan, in Lebanon, in other places in the Arab world. And of course, there was an attack in Nice, and now this is in Lyon. Again, in Lyon, they say that they don't have any suspect yet. Someone was arrested and then released promptly thereafter. But this is horrific. And they are keying in on churches, church populations, and of course, in this case, a priest.
You know, let's circle back to that for just a second here. Tens of thousands of Muslims in Pakistan, Lebanon, and as you mentioned, the Palestinian territories joined protests recently over Macron's vow to protect the right to caricature the Prophet Muhammad. You know, more than 10,000 people tried marching towards the French embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan, but were turned back with police using tear gas and batons.
Yes, they are not backing down. They are incredibly furious at Macron's statements. And let's take a moment to talk about how nice, for lack of a better word, or how lax Macron has been to the Muslim immigrants that have come into France, criticized by a lot of other parts of Europe to say, you're being incredibly lax, you're going to regret this. And perhaps this is where, you might see some remorse for that very, very open immigration policy that led to the beheading of a teacher just a couple weeks ago over teaching about the cartoons of Prophet Muhammad. This is an incredible story because it really just connects the dots on migration, on showing that these populations not only come into Europe, but they will stand their ground to make headscarves mandatory, to have Muslim holidays off, to they are anti assimilation of any sort. And when Macron says it is part of our policy to allow free speech, as long as it doesn't offend anyone, for them to stand up like this all across the Arab world, I don't think this is going to quiet down anytime soon.
So we might be seeing Sharia law, is that what you're saying, in many parts of Europe right now? A lot of people are saying since many European countries threw open the doors to a lot of refugees, we have those Islamist extremists that posed as refugees that made their way in various pockets throughout Europe right now. That's why we're seeing some of these terror attacks.
Sure, and that's exactly the argument that has always been made against very liberal and lax immigration policies, to say that you can't call the DMV in Syria or wherever and say, who is this guy? Can you vet him for me? And for that reason, good people have to be punished because bad people can mix in. And it sounds very harsh and it sounds very unforgiving, but this is what happens. You have good people, innocent people now dying because of those bad people or influences that got into the country. So, it doesn't look like Sharia law will take over Europe, obviously, not in a formal capacity, but in an informal capacity. You have these pockets, communities where that is growing, where they are practicing their Sharia law, where they are punishing their daughters by the honor system because they have boyfriends, etc. So, what to do about this? There is obviously a more pragmatic approach that one can take without being extremely harsh or extremely lenient for the sake of the future of Europe or any free country that wants to live freely and not have attacks at church every Sunday.
Protests continued in Belarus with more than 200 people detained in the latest anti-government protest that was fueled by disputed presidential election there 3 months ago.
This is not dying down anytime soon. I mean, talk about the energy and the resilience of these protesters. I mean, they have been repressed for such a long time. And because of that, now that they have the opportunity, you can compare this to the protests in Hong Kong, for example, when they have the opportunity to have a platform, to have a stage for it, they will not back down anytime soon. And there have been many attempts at intervention that have not worked. The government there is not backing down. And of course, they have help from outside. And again, the protesters are back on the streets and still going strong.
Militants affiliated with the Islamic State terror group have ramped up their attacks against the Syrian government forces and allied militias in the Syrian desert region, Lisa. Last week, ISIS said it killed at least a dozen Syrian troops. No peace in that area.
No peace in that area, and that is one of the reasons why President Trump withdrew some of the troops from Syria, understanding that there would be no resolution that would happen quickly and to the liking of either side. Look, ISIS is not growing, as a terror group, but where they are still launching these one-off attacks, and because of that, we still do have, targeted attacks against Syria, against leaders of ISIS, against their clusters, so to speak. So there are still forces and U.S. forces on the ground there fighting ISIS in the capacity that is necessary. But again, that war has been going on for more than a decade, and it will probably continue for another decade because there is no end in sight. You obviously have influences in there from Russia, from the Iranian regime, propping up Bashar al-Assad's forces, and you also have the insurgencies there fighting the ground forces. So, there's no answer, and there's no short at the end of this in short term.
Now, here's kind of a bizarre story. Two men who allegedly duped a doctor into buying Aladdin's lamp for more than 70,000 pounds have been arrested in India. Lisa, the guys even had a fake genie. That's going all in.
This is a great story. My favorite part is when he takes this lamp and goes to the police and says, "Oh, it doesn't work." Someone that would not be as kind as I am would say perhaps deserved it, but I will not say that. I would say this is an awful trick, and it's a funny headline, and sometimes we need a good laugh. But they actually went to this guy. I think he's a doctor by trade, and said we have a genie's lamp, and they sold it to him for a very hefty price tag. And he was surprised to see that he did not get a genie, and he did not get his 3 wishes.
Oh, that would be the one thing I'd ask for, three more wishes. And one of the wishes is less wildfires for next season. Let's bring things a little closer to home now, talk about what's happening on the West Coast. We've heard of the wildfires burning in Oregon, Washington State, and where you are in Southern California. What's the latest?
Yes, we have had fires here throughout the Southern California. Last week, close to Irvine, close to Orange County, if you're familiar with the area. But you could smell the smoke out here as well. This is the season for it, and this year has been relentless. We have had more acres burned than in ever before in recorded history, and they continue. I think Napa is more under control. They are trying to get back up on their feet for wine season, but here and there we see them off the freeway. You can see the smoke, you can smell the smoke, and hopefully we'll be done with 2020 very soon.
Yeah, Lisa, stay safe.
Thank you too.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.